Monday night BBC Teas. Now, this is a subject that comes around on a fairly regular basis. Should we legalise cannabis? Now, at the moment, it's a Class B drug, and anyone caught in possession could face 5 years in jail or a fine. But now, a think tank reckons by legalising the drug, we could net the government £1 billion a year in tax revenue. The Adam Smith Institute has produced a report backed by some MPs, including former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg. It claims as well that tax benefits, it would also have impact on criminals involved in smuggling and supply of cannabis into the UK. But the Home Office said it has no plans to legalise this harmful drug. Michael Fisher from Teesside Cannabis Club gave me his reaction to the report a little earlier.
It's a long time overdue. I think it's great that all the political parties are currently, we've got members from all parties across the board in support of this. I think it's great to see Peter Lilly's name in there, the Conservative MP. I think that basically prohibition has failed, the war on drugs has failed, and I think the government are finally, even if it is for taxation reasons, are finally coming around to a sensible way of thinking, and that's what needs to be done. Sensible drug policy needs to be addressed, basically.
So that whatever you know that you're buying is safe?
Yeah, it's about a safe market, basically, where people in the street, when they're having to buy cannabis from illegal means, as in drug dealers or unsavoury members of the community, normally tend to sell not just cannabis, they tend to sell harder drugs sometimes. A lot of people who smoke cannabis are normal people of the community who don't associate with criminals in any way, shape or form, so it's a very unsavoury time for them to have to deal with people who actually get hold of cannabis. The cannabis that they get or the medicine that they're using, it could contain mould, or it could be sprayed with pesticides, or it could have a whole bunch of other things on it that no one knows, and we have no way of knowing. So I think if it was regulated, where you can go to a store like in Colorado basically, and you can pick what you're going to buy, and you know that it's been tested and it's regulated and that it's safe to use and consume, I think that in itself is worth the regulation in itself, and I think people will pay the tax just to have that safe cannabis product. It also then hand in hand takes away from the criminal aspects, the criminal market. You won't have these gangs that are grown like big commercial growers, because you've taken away from that. No one needs to do that. Obviously you're not going to see a complete stop of like criminal activity, just the same as when tobacco since has been taken from the shops in where it's not so blatant around. We don't see so many illegal cigarette houses on the streets. You don't see kids smoking cigarettes as much as we used to, say 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think that a point of regulation can be proven that if it's done right and if it's done tight enough, you will take away from the criminal aspects of the gangs. Well, you'll dent them significantly, even if you're not going to stop it completely. You will dent them significantly.
Can you understand, though, from the other side of the argument, the
dangers and the concerns of
Absolutely.
I totally do understand, and I think that one of the most important aspects of this argument is not to be one-sided. I think that we need to have a rational debate and a sensible debate about this.
But there are conflicting reports.
Conflicting evidence and reports, but once again, that's just another argument for regulation, because at the end of the day, if cannabis was legal, all these studies could be more concise, they could be done in a correct environment, and there wouldn't be like a taboo subject.
But you do hear of case studies, though, where people start with cannabis and then they move on to harder drugs.
Well, yeah, but once again, they started with caffeine, they had a cup of tea, then they moved on to cannabis. Education, we want the schools to educate
children. And you think that's the key?
That's the key, education, regulation and education.
And information.
Yeah, information.
And listening to that, and joining me now is Durham's Police Crime and Victims Commissioner Ron Hogg. Thank you very much for joining us on BBC Teas, Ron. What's your reaction to the report?
Well, I think the report's yet another step towards a total review of our drugs policy, and it's well overdue. If you think about it, the Misuse of Drugs Act is now 45 years old. It doesn't fit the bill for today's purposes, and it's certainly not tackling the drug problem in any way, shape or form. So I'm very keen to have a total review of all our drugs policy.
Now, this is just a think tank report, and there's many of these brought out from time to time. Do you think we're really any closer to seeing the legalisation of cannabis?
I think we are massively closer to that. I mean, I personally would rather go for decriminalisation in the first instance, because there are harms there. But a lot of what Michael Fisher was saying there makes absolute good sense about seeking to have regulations so we can control the quality of the drug. But what Michael was also saying there was, let's have this debate. I mean, the government's introduced the Psychoactive Substances Act recently, and in that you can now legally possess spice, which is infinitely more harmful than skunk. And so there's an absolute nonsense in the current laws.
But as I did say to Michael as well, that there are concerns, and these have to be listened to as well.
And that's why I would rather see, let's go down the first step of decriminalising.
What's the difference?
Well, what we can do if we decriminalise, it means we can actually put more money into health solutions rather than into putting people into prison. We can save money through the criminal justice system. And where drugs have been decriminalised, and they're looking at it now in Canada, they have done so in Portugal, it means that actually the number of people taking drugs has reduced, profits to organised crime groups has reduced, and indeed we've got more people in recovery receiving treatment. And I think that has to be a key step forward.
And does that have a knock-on effect to other types of crime as well?
It does indeed, because people actually are committing crimes across the UK in order to feed their drugs habits. But I think I just want this sensible debate. It's not for me to talk about, the medical aspects. All I know is that as a former police officer and as a police crime and victims commissioner now, the drug which causes the police service the greatest harm is alcohol, and that is legal and it's regulated. So I do think we need to debate all of our drug policy.
And looking at that, it's saying that there's $1 billion in tax possibly could be brought in as revenue. Do you think the North East would see any of that money?
Well, do I think the North East benefits very much from this government? But I'd like to think that we would, because obviously there are quite considerable problems in the North East. Drugs is a key part of some of the problems in our communities on the back of deprivation, and so I would hope that we would benefit.
So what would you like to see if any of that money did come? What sort of initiatives would you be using it for?
I'd like it to go into education around drugs. I'd like it to go into treatment for addicts, to support addicts back into recovery. I'd like it to go into projects which actually would help people to put their lives back together. I'd like it, to really act as a very positive incentive to invest in our communities.
But how far is that down the line, in your opinion?
I think this is probably 10, 15 years away, to be honest with you, which is why I'm calling now for a more immediate position on decriminalise. Let's have the debate, but let's get some of this money out of the drug dealers' hands. Let's allow people who have a drug problem step forward for treatment. Because at the moment, if we're honest, the key way to get into drug treatment is to be arrested having committed an offence. That's absolute nonsense.
Absolutely. Ron, thank you very much for your time. Ron Hogg, Durham's Police Crime and Victims Commissioner.